Hello, friends. We're back again. It's Fightful Overbooked, and it's time for the runaway freight train of hits, known as Newsworthy. Jeremy Lambert's with me as always. Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm tired, Joel Pearl. It's been a long week. You know, Sean Rossap goes on vacation, and then who's got to run things while he's on vacation, partying with Denise Salcedo at her wedding? But me. I'm listening to StarCast interviews. I'm covering SummerSlam, covering Ric Flair's last match. Just had a day off in 2 weeks. What is this? What is this, Joel? And do I not get a vacation day?
You do, but your vacation involves fighting people.
Yeah, I'm going to punch him in October. I'm going to clock him square in the face. That's what I'm going to do. This show has become me just venting about everything. It's great. I love this show. It's my favorite show I do every single week. The only downside is it's with you.
That's fair. Well, you know what? If you're enjoying the show over there in YouTube land, go ahead and leave us a thumbs up because Jeremy needs all the recognition he can get. Because that way he can
pay raise. You need another raise. I'm gonna ask Sean for another raise.
Go to Sean, and then you can go to Jimmy, and then you can. There you go. And then everyone's gonna get more money. That's true. Jimmy will pay attention to you when you walk up to his house and punch him in the face.
I can't get booked on Know Your News. All these people get booked on this show. Me, who puts in the most work at the website, I can't get on this show. Jimmy, I think he's mad that my team swept this team in the playoffs. It's very upsetting.
Very possible.
I just want Jimmy Van's acceptance. That's all I'm looking for.
I'm going to pull the curtain back. I think some people know, but not everyone knows that I do the production. I do the producing for Know Your News. I do when he does his podcast, Know Your News Tonight, I'm behind the live element, putting it all together with the recordings and stuff. We were supposed to have Andrew Zarian this past week, but then some timing and schedules got messed up. So we were kind of frantically looking around for guests. And in the back of my head, Jeremy, I did have your name. But
thanks that I was in the back of the head. Joel's like, let me go through about 50 people before I get to Jeremy's name.
Well, instead I went for Jarrett Bailey because I wanted someone who was actually associated with the Know Your News channel for a change. And it ended up being an all-timer. So when it drops on Tuesday, if you're watching this when it drops on Saturday, go check it out. Or if you're watching it after the fact, just go find it.
Fuck Jarrett Bailey.
True. He's an awful, awful human. Anyway, what's not awful are the 5 stories of the week that we picked, or that you've picked, that we're going to talk through. Let's start with story number 5. Dakota Kai says WWE SummerSlam return was last minute, wanted to work with Bayley for years. This came from WWE's The Bump, which I know, Jeremy, you're just trying to pop me because we know that nobody watches The Bump but me. And I'm very glad that suddenly someone's watching The Bump. Tell me about this very big return for Dakota Kai this past week at SummerSlam, and then the interview that precedes this.
I mean, I used to watch The Bump regularly. They moved it from 10 o'clock to like 1 o'clock. But I used to watch it all the time because the interviews were, sometimes you get something out of them. And then it became such like a kayfabe show that is like, I don't feel like writing these kayfabe articles. Like, I write kayfabe articles. I did a Maxine Dupree article that was completely kayfabe. Like, I'll write them if they're out there. That's fine. But I don't want to waste my time listening to an hour and a half WWE show that's just going to be all kayfabe and everything. So when I saw Dakota Kai was going to be on there, that's what I thought. I was like, well, she's going to kayfabe this thing, and it's not going to be all that great, and it's whatever. But it was her first interview since the big return at SummerSlam that I don't think anyone saw coming. So, like, I had to listen. Even if it was in kayfabe, I was like, I'm going to pull something out of this regardless because it's her first interview since the return. It was somewhat in kayfabe, but also the part that she mentioned, like, last minute wanting to work with Bayley and everything, that was very much real. So I thought it was a good interview. Dakota Kai is so likable. She's always been very likable. I've mentioned her before. She does the streams with like the New Legacy guys, the big dog Dakota Kai. She just seems like such a genuine and nice person. So one, I was glad to see her back at SummerSlam because I've always liked Dakota Kai, both as a wrestler and as a person from what I know about her through Twitter and streams. And two, I was just happy that this wasn't like, oh yeah, Bayley hit me up and was like, you want to form this faction? And, EO's going to be part of it. I didn't, I was off television for a little while. I was just, Raquel got called up. I didn't know what I was doing in NXT. Like they didn't say outright, hey, I got released, but they at least like said enough about it to be like, yeah, okay, we know what happened. You're not trying to just be like, I was lost in NXT as it rebranded and I didn't have anything to do. I'm glad it wasn't full on like kayfabe's like Bayley brought me here. and everything. I thought it was a good interview, and again, glad to see Dakota back. Love her. Thought she was great on this appearance on the bump as well.
Two things worth noting coming out of that interview, by the way. For the select few who watch NXT 2.0, Wade Barrett actually talked about Dakota Kai's return on commentary and made reference to the fact that she had left the company and came back.
Oh.
So yes, it was a little bit of an unshackled commentary moment that I was shocked that he would even reference that.
I mean, we saw on SmackDown or SummerSlam where Corey Graves is like, I liked you better when you didn't have an opinion. Yeah, and Cole's like, well, things have changed around here, buddy.
Yes.
Yeah, like they're definitely a little bit more unhinged under Papa Paul, which is good. Michael Cole's been great. I actually kind of listen to commentary now. Michael Cole's been great since Papa Paul took over.
There's going to be a 90-day inmates run the asylum.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But there was that, so that's one thing, and the other thing is actually that Dakota Kai had tweeted out that she's still going to be streaming. She said that her streams aren't going anywhere.
Good.
So that's going to open up the doors for a lot of conversation regarding WWE wrestlers getting their third parties back, whether that's YouTube or they're streaming on Twitch, whatever that is. I think there's going to be an open conversation about them returning to those platforms.
So real
or
quickly,
she signed a deal that has that included.
Yeah, but real quickly, I mentioned this on the spotlight, not this past week, but the following week, of like what Triple H, him running things, and Stephanie and Nick Khan, like what that means for people. And I did mention like the third party stuff because obviously Triple H didn't have an issue with it in NXT. Like those guys Adam Cole could do his streams, and then when he wanted to go to main roster, it's like, well, you might have to give this up now. I hope that main roster people can start to do that again. Do these streams, do outside ventures, and then hopefully that'll bring more eyeballs in. There was a report, I think it was like AdSense or something, of like WWE's YouTube views and stuff. And then one of the executives was like, yeah, we're going to work more closely with our talent to put more content on our YouTube channel. And they mentioned Sheamus's Celtic Warrior workouts were apparently going to be starting up on the WWE YouTube again pretty soon. Like, I'm fine if it goes on like the WWE YouTube, or much like Up Up Down Down, there's some type of like partnership there, as long as those guys get paid, because apparently Woods wasn't like making as much as he should have for all the work he put in on that. But like, I'm fine with that stuff, just as long as the wrestlers benefit from all of that. If they're not just, hey, yeah, well, you can do your stuff, but we actually take 99% of the profits, that's an issue with me. But if it's in conjunction with WWE and there's a fair split on things, awesome. And I do hope they can do like Twitch and things like that, because it's good. It doesn't hurt anybody, right? It's not hurting anybody.
No, it's not hurting anybody. And on top of that, these are all adults who know how to handle themselves in an environment outside of work. So there has to be some sort of agreement, if there is, to like maybe don't talk about work on your streams, or if you do, be cognizant. It's a PR thing. It's a watch what you say thing, because listen, some wrestlers did go a little overboard and maybe overshare on those platforms, but that wasn't really the case. It was more the money than anything else. If we see a revenue split of some sorts, I agree with you. If it's a fair split, then there's no reason not to do it. These people are entertainers. These people are there to have fun and do the things that make them smile, and therefore do it in WWE as well. So I'd be interested to see if it's just Dakota Kai or if there are other people who are going to start picking up the streaming again soon. Let's move on to story number 4. Pat McAfee says he's tested by WWE Wellness. He answers whether he could take steroids. Big Pat McAfee show fan, I know you are. Once in a while, we'd like to catch the shows, especially when he has some wrestling-related content, at least on my end. That's when I watch. Tell me about this. What struck your fancy other than the wellness policy stuff?
Well, this wasn't actually from the Pat McAfee show. I did watch the Pat McAfee show on Monday because I figured he would talk about SummerSlam, and I did write a big write-up on that. But he did an interview with Dan Patrick, who is, and people who have known me for a long time know that like I kind of idolize Dan Patrick and still do. I unfortunately just don't have a lot of time to like watch his show regularly because I've listened to so many other wrestling interviews and stuff. Like, I spend my time doing work stuff, and so I don't always just get to watch stuff that I used to really enjoy and stuff. But I love Dan Patrick. He was one of from his Sports Center days to when he started doing the Dan Patrick show. I would watch it religiously every morning, and actually won a TV from the Dan Patrick show. So Pat McAfee was interviewed by Dan Patrick, And Dan Patrick asked him, like, hey, you're in WWE now. It's performance. Like, you're like an actor, and actors might take steroids to boost for a role and everything. He's like, have you ever thought about like taking steroids and stuff for WWE? And McAfee gave the answer of like, well, WWE has a wellness policy. I'm tested. I've given my blood a bunch of times. And then he said, like, you know, we in the locker room, these guys be coming in like, hey, how'd you get like that? And he even said, like, hey, I've thought about it. One, they're hard to get in Indiana. Can't just go up to the corner store and be like, can you make me look like a guy in an NFL locker room? And he's like, and there's just, he didn't want to put stuff that he didn't fully know about into his body, but he did say, like, if there was something that was kind of approved that helps my metabolism, helps my recovery, sure, I'd have no problem doing it. I love this because one, I thought it was an interesting answer. Two, as a fan of the Pat McAfee show and Pat McAfee in general, and as a fan of Dan Patrick and the Dan Patrick show, it was just kind of these two worlds kind of crossing for me. And so I was very interested to see how the interview went and what the things they talked about. So I was excited to cover this, and I'm glad McAfee, this is a question that, like, you know, people aren't asking. Nobody's asking a lot of these WWE wrestlers, hey, you ever thought about doing steroids? Like, but McAfee gave a great answer, and it was a different kind of question from a respected journalist like Dan Patrick.
5 years ago, Brock Lesnar was putting himself back in the USADA pool, and there was also conversation about whether or not Brock was taking any steroids or whether he was actually being tested by WWE as a part-time roster member. So I like that these stories kind of come up around the same time. It's SummerSlam season. You've got a part-timer wrestler in terms of Pat McAfee, and then of course back in the day you had Brock Lesnar, who was still performing on a regular somewhat basis. So I like the story. It was a good one. And I listen, you're a big Dan Patrick fan, and if you're a big Pat McAfee fan, then it turns out that this is a match made in heaven for you.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, Dan Patrick doesn't have like a ton of wrestlers and stuff on his show. This is, maybe he's had, I know he's at Austin over the years. He's had a few people over the years, but I know he's not like the biggest wrestling fan in the world. And so obviously I don't think he had Pat McAfee on because, like, hey, Pat McAfee's a WWE commentator and just wrestled at SummerSlam. I think it was because they talked a lot about the NFL career and stuff, but McAfee is now involved in the world of wrestling. And so it was a different kind of question where I've listened to the Pat McAfee show 100 times. He's done interviews with other people, and you're typically not going to get this kind of question out of, hey, you're Pat McAfee, the wrestler. Let's talk about SummerSlam. Let's talk about your role in WWE. Like, Dan Patrick doesn't really care as much about that stuff. So you get steroid questions, which I found interesting.
Yeah, it's an outside the box question for sure. I liked it. Let's move on to story number 3. Keira Hogan felt like she was always somebody's best friend in Impact Wrestling. So I got to say, I loved this quote and I love this headline because it takes the sharpest left turn it could possibly take. You're like, oh, someone's best friend. Keira Hogan's always, and then she's just like, no, this sucked and I hate it.
Yeah.
So she's on the taco vlog with Thunder Rosa. Talk about this again. Very much a big left turn from Keira Hogan.
I like the taco vlog with Thunder Rosa because they eat tacos, but there is like an interview element, and you're not going to get like too much out of it, but they're just having a conversation. And I've said it before on this show, like, I like the interviews that just kind of feel like conversations because that's where you can find nice little nuggets of information in there. And like they were just having a conversation while eating tacos. The audio was god awful. It was very tough to transcribe because the audio was so bad. It's like set up a camera in this talk, and there's music playing in the background and stuff. Just, it is what it is. You're not there to listen. Most people are not trying to pull interview quotes out of Thunder Rosa's taco vlog or anything like that. But I like the answer because I thought it was funny as well. Of like, yeah, the headline is, oh, I'm somebody's best friend. And like, oh, that seems like maybe it's cool. It's like, no, I wanted a singles run. Like, I had to leave Impact to get like this title match against Mickie James and everything. I find Keira Hogan to be kind of fascinating when it comes to interviews. Like when she appeared on like Gall TV a few months ago, when she just first signed with AEW, and she's like, yeah, I'm not really being used in AEW. I don't really know what I'm doing out there right now. And then now she's with the baddies and everything. She's found her role, whatnot, but she's not afraid to like say what's on her mind. And I like that about her. Sometimes I know it's like gotten in trouble with Stan Twitter on certain things, but she's not afraid to actually give an answer. And I appreciate anybody that is actually going to give an answer.
Is she your best friend, Jeremy?
Me and Keira Hogan could be best friends. I don't know why not. I feel like she'd like me. I like her. She seems nice.
Do you have
Never
similar
met.
tastes in music or anything like that? What would your best friendship be like with Keira Hogan?
I have no idea what she listens to. I don't know these people, Joel Pearl.
I don't know. A lot of the time you listen to a lot of the interviews and eventually something comes out that you're like, oh, they're just like me.
I've probably heard the kind of music that she likes. Like she's probably mentioned it in an interview, but sometimes like when it comes to those questions, I'll just like zone out on it. And I listen, Joel, I listen to so much that like a lot of this stuff blends together or gets lost in the shuffle. And no offense to Keira Hogan, who I just said that I like, and we could be best friends. I don't remember if she has said her musical preferences. I don't remember what they are.
Do you enjoy Toronto's own The Weeknd, Jeremy Lambert?
He's fine. I like some of his early stuff. Isn't that the answer for everything? Like I like the early stuff, but the stuff nowadays just isn't quite as good.
Well, that's typically how it works in music. But if you want to be besties with Keira Hogan, her and Diamante were backstage at The Weeknd this past week.
Oh, is that why you like brought that all together? That was nice, Show Pearl. That was a nice little scoop that she was at The Weeknd concert.
I mean, it was from Diamante's Twitter. There was two of them sitting at the show, and I was like, oh, that's nice. I couldn't figure out who it was, and then I was like, oh, now I know. Anyway, let's move on. Number 2, this person never does interviews. Yeah. Dexter Loomis is in the news. Dexter Loomis reflects on his time in NXT, is still in touch with Triple H and Shawn Michaels. He showed up at Johnny Gargano's What's Next show or podcast, whatever you want to call it, at StarCast, and basically just sat on the dais
rolled
and just read a pro wrestling magazine. And it was funny. It was great. But here he is talking to Tommy Dreamer on House of Hardcore podcast. Talk to me about Dexter Loomis. It is rare that he speaks to the media.
This was, I believe, his first interview since like leaving. He did a virtual signing where he said absolutely nothing, like after getting released. Yeah, he said that, like, I watched that thing, it's like 2 hours and he doesn't say like a single word, completely in character. He was supposed to be on Devon Dudley's podcast, Table Talk, like a week after he got released, and then he wasn't on it. And I don't know if it was because of the release thing, he just didn't want to talk about it. I don't know the reason for it, but he just wasn't on it that week. And that was going to be, I think it was like the final episode of Devon's podcast as well. So to my knowledge, this is the first interview he's done since he got released. And obviously things have changed in NXT and WWE since his release, and there's a possibility now that he's even back, within the next month or two. But yeah, so because it was his first interview, I was like, okay, well, I'm sure he's going to say something. He gave very, answers that you would kind of expect him to say. He didn't bury anybody, which is fine. I never look for like, oh, I can't wait to see if they bury this person. I just look for stories. I liked the interview. It was a good interview. My thing with Tommy Dreamer is, while I'll praise Bubba Ray Dudley, Bully Ray, of like, I think he's a great interviewer on Busted Open Radio. Tommy Dreamer will have the habit of like telling his own stories too much instead of just focusing on the interviewee. And I realize this is very difficult. And I know Tommy Dreamer like comes from and Tommy Dreamer does Busted Open Radio as well. And sometimes that'll like annoy me when it comes to this stuff. Sometimes you drop like a little nugget in there. It's like, oh, I can actually write a story out of that. Good for Tommy Dreamer. I don't find Dreamer to be like the best interviewer in the world, but I do like the guest he gets on a lot of times. He's sometimes inconsistent with this podcast. I did think he did a good job with this. He clearly has like a relationship with Loomis, Sam Shaw. Hatchet is what he is in the title of this podcast. But yeah, that's my critique, I guess, of Tommy Dreamer is I don't always want to hear like your stories on thing. I'm there to listen to the guest, not how you feel about this stuff. And again, I'm probably the last person to criticize this because in a lot of our interviews, I feel sometimes I will tell my own stories or how I feel about things as well. So this is take this with a grain of salt coming from me. I'm just saying the best interviewers typically don't do that and will just ask questions, ask follow-ups. Dreamer feels very, I guess, rigid in his interview style. And that's where I'm just like I wish there was a little bit more listening and following up from Dreamer, but it is very like, tell me about this. Like he hits the questions he wants to hit. As far as Loomis goes, I thought he was very good. I thought he gave some good stories about like his time in Impact and then obviously his time in NXT and everything. And just who he is like as a person. Like he was like, I want to be an attraction. I want to be somebody you can count on to do this, this, and this. And Triple H told me that. And, I still talk to these guys and everything. So I thought it was a good interview from Loomis, and for even from Dreamer, I thought this was one of his better ones. Sorry, I just buried Tommy Dreamer on the show.
Wow.
Nobody watches this, right? Tommy Dreamer's he's not gonna see this or anything, right?
I mean, listen, Tommy Dreamer once DM'd me to tell me what type of phone he uses. So
really?
Yeah, this was also in like 2012.
Oh, okay.
This is a long ass time ago, but he did in fact DM me to tell me what phone he uses. So
wow,
very interesting day that was.
So what kind of phone was it? What kind of phone was it?
It was a droid of some sorts.
No, Tommy
Again,
Dreamer
it was 10 years ago.
In 2012. Yeah, I probably used a droid in 2012, honestly.
Yeah, I was a big droid guy until I got an iPhone, and I only got an iPhone because I started working for a company that like sold and refurbished iPhones. So I was like, well, I'm around them all the time. I may as well get into the ecosystem. Anyway, point is, Sam Shaw, you think you see Sam Shaw coming back to WWE, or is this going to be Sam Shaw, future NWA 10 pounds of gold holder?
I feel like if they were going to put the belt on him, they just like should have done that at the Always Ready show. Because whatever.
First of all, we got to get to Tyrus first. We all know this.
Shut up, Joel. Shut up. I do kind of think he's like sort of WWE coming back there. Maybe he finds NXT. Maybe he does something else. I don't know, but like he's very unique. Like I liked him on NXT. He has a unique charisma about him. He can kind of fill multiple roles he could be like funny but creepy. A fine wrestler. Like I could definitely see him ending up back there in some capacity.
Yeah. I mean, listen, he's a bit older, but at least he has the knowledge and the experience to maybe even do some backstage stuff, or who knows, maybe they have a role for him on the camera, but we'll see. Who knows? Maybe Sam Shaw is like an incredible wrestling commentator and he ends up becoming like the lead announcer on one of the shows. Could you imagine? Just people would freak out. They would just love every minute of it. Or he says nothing, and every time they show him at the desk, he's just brandishing his hatchets.
Great, honestly. Great.
Let's go to number one. Bryan Danielson's in the news again. I can't believe he did this. Bryan Danielson, the locker room is the boys talking about flaccid penises. It's a blast.
Yeah.
Jeremy. This was a great interview, by the way. Not even interview, it was a conversation on the sessions with Renee Paquette at Starcast. I'd listened to this interview, or this conversation as it were. There was a lot of stuff that came from that conversation. This is the one you chose to write about. And it's also the one that there were others, I know, but this is the one you chose to talk about today on the show, on Newsworthy.
Yes. Yeah.
And it definitely got a lot of engagements on the internet, even from some AEW wrestlers.
Okay, so yes, let's clarify. I wrote about 5 articles off of this Danielson interview. Yeah. This wasn't even my lead article because this interview happened on Saturday, and I wrote about him wanting to punch The Miz. I think that's the one I ran immediately on Saturday. I wrote about him wanting to get like fired off talking smack, him being in WWE Creative. No, actually the one that I led with was his recent concussion where he thought like he might have to retire. That's the one I ran on Saturday. Sunday was the original plan. He was supposed to punch The Miz on talking smack. I knew though, when I heard this conversation about the locker room, the flaccid penis talk and everything, I was like, I'm going to lead off Monday morning, Monday at 8 a.m. Everybody's going to come off this busy weekend. It's going to be, everybody's already pulled the news stuff they wanted from the Danielson article. All that stuff's already circulating out there. Monday, 8 a.m., flaccid penises in the AEW locker room. This is what I'm leading with on Monday. I was so excited for this. I was so excited after this big old weekend. It's like, oh, okay, it's going to be a slow news day. No, Bryan Danielson hits you with flaccid penis. Everyone knows, like, this show is now 2 out of the 3 episodes have, number 1 has been Bryan Danielson with that fucking image that needs to be on a t-shirt, and I want royalties for it, even though I have nothing to do with it. Like when Danielson was announced for this and he's going to talk to Renee, I was like, he's going to say something. The thing that actually popped me the most wasn't even the flaccid penis thing. It was like when he said like, oh, I like bleeding. I enjoy it. And Renee is like, yeah, you and John, like you just like that stuff. She's like, I don't get it. And Daniel's like, you do it every month.
And the crowd reaction is like, ooh. And they're just like, wait a minute. They stopped the entire conversation just to point out the crowd. Like, that's where you draw the line.
I laughed so hard at that. I was like, I can't really like get an article out of that though. That's just like a funny little line that he has. I can't like make that. I mean, I could have, but I've headline morals. I have article morals sometimes. But yeah, I couldn't really make that a story. The flaccid penis one, I could 100% make a story. And I did. Again, I let it 8 a.m. I was so excited for this. And man, at like noon, 1 o'clock that day, it had just taken on a life of his own. And I tweeted earlier in the day, like, I got a lot of pals in wrestling media. I think they all hate me because I try to pit them against each other. But I got a lot of pals in wrestling media who do a lot of interviews. I just want one of them to ask, like, do you know? Do you know about this? Either the answer is no, which is fine, and he's lying because he's a big old liar. He's admitted this. Cody Rhodes taught him to lie. The answer is either no, and he's lying, or it's yes, and that's like the biggest pop of my writing career is that Bryan Danielson has some sort of knowledge of this image and these headlines. But by the afternoon, the AEW locker room is popping. John Silver was the first one the first one that I saw anyway. That was like, this isn't completely true. We also talk about hard penises, and so I was like, well, this is an easy article to also write about. The best friends, Trent is talking about, like finally some accurate reporting in the world of wrestling. There was a bunch of Swerve had like a reaction. Anthony Bowens had a reaction. And I was so excited to just quote tweet that and be like, can you scissor me, Anthony Bowens? And he scissored me. I scissored with Anthony Bowens, Joel Pearl. That was the highlight of my day. Monday was an eventful day because of this headline.
You took the rest of the week off at that point. You were like, I don't have to do anything else.
I wish. I did tweet, like, I'm taking the rest of the day off, and then I probably did, like, 5. I covered Raw. I said I was taking the rest of the day off, and then I ended up covering Raw, which was a good show. But
yeah, I was going to say, it ended up being okay. Yeah, if you had said that like 3 weeks ago, I would have been like, oh, that sucks, buddy. You would have been absolutely miserable. John Silver, says this isn't entirely true. There's been a wreck penis talk as well. Brian Pillman Jr. says, I guess nothing is sacred anymore. Captain Sean Dean says, every week Bryan Danielson has a wild conversation going on in the locker room. Swerve Strickland says, me every week, and it's a photo of him giving that face. And there have been others, but I'm just pulling up some of these quote tweets. One of my favorites, there's someone actually just a fan, someone who picked it up, named Jacqueline, and it's all caps, stop interviewing this man.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I tweeted when the interview was going on, I was like, me listening to Danielson talk with Renee at StarCast, and it's that Danielson image. I knew he was going to say something outlandish. And let me tell you, Renee does 2 podcasts a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, the sessions. And when I saw Bryan Danielson on Tuesday, I was like, is this a new one? Like, did they have a conversation after StarCast that they just talked more about stuff? And I saw it's just the StarCast interview just posted to her podcast feed. But I was so excited Tuesday morning when I saw he was on the sessions, thinking this was like a part 2 of like the unaired footage from StarCast. I was like, oh man, I'm good. This is going to be great. No, keep interviewing Bryan Danielson. He's the best. That's all I gotta know. I have to know, Joel Pearl. Somebody, Mueller does AEW interviews. Like, somebody's got to interview Danielson at some point. I just ask him for me, please. If you're out there, if you're one of our pals listening who interview wrestlers and you're gonna interview Danielson, where's Robbie Fox? He interviewed Danielson the other week. Robbie knows of me. Like, just ask him if he knows this stuff, please. For me, this is all I want out of my wrestling media life. That's all I want. Just ask him if he knows.
If you're a friend of the show and you're a friend of Fightful and you interview Bryan Danielson, just ask, do you know?
Yes.
And Danielson would be like, oh, I know. I know. And then have a full-on 50-minute conversation about this. By the way, there's a backdoor reason why we do this show. I think a lot of people assume that Sean Ross Sapp is the person writing these articles. And there was one quote tweet on that Danielson article that was just like, Sean Ross Sapp, per usual, getting all the news. And I was like, no, Like, this is Jeremy Lambert's job. This is his gimmick. He does a really good job at it. Sean's good at whatever the hell he does, but it's not important. Like, this is a Jeremy Lambert gimmick. I don't know what Sean does. I just beat his ass once in a while. Either way, we do this show because I hope people understand that Fightful has many more people writing in the background than just the guy who posts on Select most of the time.
I mean, I ranted and raved about that last time we did this, of like, oh, people tag Sean and think like he does all of this, when again, like 75% or more of what you see on Fightful.com, if it's not Patreon, like, has my name on it.
Yeah.
And a lot of these interviews, like 80% or more, like these interviews, like, is because I listened and transcribed to it. Would I always like credit for that stuff? Yes, because it is a lot of work. I will say this to people who are like, oh, Sean Ross Sapp getting the news as always. Sean's the absolute best at what he does, whatever that is. He's the absolute best. All of the news, not all, but like the majority of news you read is either coming because Sean is reporting on stuff, or coming because a wrestler like said something in an interview. And most of the time, not all the time, Fightful is getting those interviews before the majority of websites and everything. Andrew Thompson at Post is like the only other person who is like ahead of the curve on this stuff. Otherwise, I do think we're ahead of the curve of listening to stuff and getting it out there, because the news is either coming from Sean's reporting or something a wrestler said. That's how like you get the news, right? The wrestler said something and it becomes news on stuff. Again, we are very much ahead of the curve on a lot of that stuff. And I don't think this is too braggadocious. I think people understand that I'm the lead wrestling writer. That's apparently my title. Like, we're ahead of the curve because of a standard and a ethic and a what's the word I'm looking for? I think standard was pretty much the word I wanted to use, but a blueprint that I sort of set of like, here's what you need to do. Here's how it's done. Here's how you find stuff. This is how we stay ahead of everyone when it comes to this stuff. So yes, would I like more credit in that? Sometimes people are like, oh, Sean Ross Sapp's a dork. Why would you write about this? And it's like, well, fuck, it's fun, right?
In lieu of flowers, you can send money to Jeremy Lambert, care of paypal.me/Joel Pearl, JOELPEAL.
That's definitely not it. That's not it.
I thought it was. Oh,
No.
Is it not? Oh, my bad. You can send me money at paypal.me. Anyway, Jeremy Lambert, let's get out of here. Is there anything you want to plug? Tell them what to do.
Subscribe to Fightful Overbooked. Leave a thumbs up. You can follow me on Twitter if you would like. Watch the Spotlight. We had a great interview with Cole Radrick. He's great. Coke Radrick. We had a great interview. With Cole Radrick this week. Live interview. He rules. Watch the Spotlight on the Fightful. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate y'all.
Pull out a good hood foot photo just for Jeremy Lambert.
Yeah, that ruled.
I'm at Joel Pearl. Ladies, gentlemen, friends beyond the binary. Come and subscribe to us here at Fightful Overbooked. We do this all the time. Have a great week. Cheers.